Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Jeff Herrera. I head up marketing and channel development here at Guidance and would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the state of retail and what one leading brand is doing to fight back. You will have three distinguished speakers, one from Guidance, Brian Beck, who heads up our commerce strategy practice, Andy Solomon, CEO at Soul Society, and Kimberly Raymond, account strategist at WPromote. Lots of great content here, so let's get right to it. Brian, if you can go ahead and kick us off, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Good day, everyone. And looking forward to sharing both some trends, what we're seeing in the market with retail, as well as some real good tactics and case studies. Our goal today is to give you things you can walk away with and use in your business to address what's happening, both in terms of the challenges as well as the opportunities. So here's our topics for today. We're going to talk about the state of retail in the United States. It's not all doom and gloom. It's more about change. What's driving some of this chaos and change? Some strategies to compete. And then we're going to talk about Soul Society as a case study, and Andy, who is the CEO at Soul Society, is going to share some things that they're doing to address the trends and create growth and opportunity from amidst the chaos. So it's sort of a sad picture of an abandoned mall here on the right-hand side of my screen. But again, we'll share some of the realities and then some of the opportunities this creates for us. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So very excited to talk about what's happening in the market, but not for these companies necessarily. So these are some of the companies that are in the market today that have been impacted by some of the change that's occurring. Many of you see the news, and we need to add Toys R Us to this list of companies that are either closing a large number of their stores or have completely vanished from the landscape. And this number continues to grow, and we'll share some more details in just a minute. And what's really happening here, it feels like just a tremendous amount of chaos and that retail is dying. Really what's happening, though, is it's changing, and there's a number of factors impacting that. We're going to talk about some of those today. So number one, we're seeing shifts to e-commerce. We're seeing really a lot of this is a result of a saturation of retail doors in the United States, and we're focused today on the United States. Amazon and marketplaces are having a tremendous impact on the retail market. We're seeing that folks are actually spending more on experiences over shopping, so the consumer dollar is actually shifting. And then we're also seeing that mobile and Omni-Channel are now they're no longer options, they are really mandatory for us as retailers and brands to address. So let's get into these. So shifts in e-commerce. In the U.S., e-commerce will continue to grow, and it'll grow by 40% over the next 3 years. Here's some data from eMarketer demonstrating how it has grown and how it will continue to grow, and is expected to be over 14% of total retail sales by 2020. We often talk about e-commerce as something which is an important trend. It's sort of talked about quite a bit, but what's also behind this number is, if you flip it, 86% of retail is still going to be offline. And by the way, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so if anyone who's not speaking on the organizer side, please make sure you're on mute. So the other thing that's happening, or that we're really seeing as a driver of this, is that we're overstored. The U.S. has 8 to 10 times more retail square footage versus the European Union and other countries and regions of the world. And, partially as a result of this, as many as 9,000 U.S. retail stores are expected to close this year. I think we're close to 4,000 at this point, and there's more being announced as you see in the news. It's hard to keep up. This is some data from Business Insider here on the right. This was a few months back, and this is really just as of about halfway through the year. So it continues to grow in terms of the number of stores that are closing. And one of the pieces, again, we mentioned earlier, is that marketplaces are driving. This is a study from late 2015, which showed that marketplaces are now the #1 place consumers start their shopping journey, 64%, versus favorite merchants and their websites as search, including Google and social media. If you look back 5 to 10 years, this was a very different story. Search and merchants were dominating and marketplaces were not. So how many folks know this guy? Raise your virtual hands. and why he's laughing? Well, this is Jeff Bezos. It's a little bit of an evil laugh, I suppose. Jeff is Bezos is the CEO of Amazon, and one of the reasons he's laughing and from the belly here is that they consumed, or they were responsible for 43% of U.S. e-commerce sales in 2016. And we see the news on this all the time, and it almost becomes noise. But take a step back and really think about that number. Almost half of U.S. e-commerce sales are with one company. It's really a dramatic shift and dramatic impact on all of us. And we need to be thinking about it, and we need to be thinking about having an Amazon strategy, whether that strategy is to sell on the channel or to compete with, or perhaps both with Amazon. But we can't ignore Amazon because it's so dominant. And it's because, in large ways, it has traded places with Google for product searches. In 2015, one of our partners, a company called Bloomreach, did a study that showed that 44% of product searches were starting on starting on Amazon. That number 1 year later was over 50%, and recently saw a statistic which put it in the mid to high 50s. It's really a dramatic shift, and so we need to be paying attention to that as a factor, and it's one of the things that's impacting retail. And why is that? Well, one of the #1 reasons is personalization. The same study back in 2015 by Bloomreach showed that Amazon does a better job personalizing the experience for its customers than all of the other retailers that were surveyed, including Walmart, eBay, etc. And so that's one of the reasons why folks are going to it. And Kimberly a bit later is going to share some more data around Amazon and why people are choosing that channel. The other thing that's happening is experience is the consumer dollar is shifting towards experience. And as a great example of that is the apparel industry. If you look back to 1920, 20% of the U.S. consumer dollar was spent on apparel. When you look at that over the last 100 years and how that's trended, in 1990 that was 8%. In 2016 that was 4%. And a lot of the shifts are happening towards things like travel, dining, other types of experiences. And as our younger millennials come into their prime, as the prime buying area of the public, you're seeing that this is a continued trend across verticals. So this is another issue that we as retailers and brands are dealing with. The other thing that's happening is a consumer attention span. So I'll let you digest this slide for a second. That's a human at the top and then a goldfish below. And I'm not sure how the National Center for Biotechnology Information measured this, but apparently we as humans now have a lower attention span than a goldfish, which I find kind of funny. The point is not so much the goldfish analogy, but the fact is that we, as merchants, retailers, brands, have less time than ever to capture the consumer's attention span. And this is really another reason why we see merchants who are doing a good job on digital, as well as folks like Amazon, capturing more of the consumer dollar that's going to retail. And a lot of that attention is shifting to mobile. This is some data from one of our partners, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which shows that in early 2016, mobile became the #1 place people are looking online at product, so and interacting with retail websites. That happened in Q1 of 2016, and at the same time we're seeing tablet traffic starting to wane. And the order share is also increasing dramatically on mobile, smartphones in particular, so much so that mobile is expected to account for 50% of U.S. e-commerce revenue according to Gartner, by the end of this year. So that's a really dramatic change. So not only do you have less time, but you also have different places you need to be focused. And a lot of our companies that we work with are really catching up, still playing catch up on the really putting mobile first in their organization and thinking about it first. Omni-channel is really an expectation now. It's no longer an option. These numbers are a couple years old, but they're still very relevant. In fact, are higher now than they were. But 58% of consumers are locating items before going to a store to purchase, and 67% prefer to research online and buy from physical stores. So if you look on the left here, this is an iceberg, and really the point of this is that web influence sales are much larger than e-commerce sales. So it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and we need to be changing our thinking about how we're measuring and rewarding, incentivizing our teams, etc., around digital, because it's not just about e-commerce, it's about commerce in general across channels. So that's why Omni-Channel really is something that provides an advantage to companies that have multiple channels of selling. And it's something that we see Amazon now starting to get into, for example, is multi-channel. So this all sounds like crazy bad news, but it's not, and it's really that the fact is that retail is not dead. It's just changing. In fact, retail sales will be up 3 to 4% in 2017. If you look at, the only real dip we had was back in 2009 during the recession. If you look at the chart on the right here, so it's not a matter of us, these stores that are closing. It's not that retail is not growing. It is. In fact, physical retail, there are 3,000 new stores projected to be opened by the companies listed here. And as we also see online-only retailers like Amazon and Bonobos and others opening stores. So there's a trend. There's real value in multi-channel retail. But what's different? And the fact of the matter is that retailers aren't protected. If you're not doing a good job connecting with your customer, you can't hide anymore. This is a much more competitive environment even than 5 years ago, and innovation is no longer optional. Being mobile first, and truly mobile first, not just talking about it, is a mandate. You've got to deliver omni-channel, and because channel preferences are changing, having a fantastic e-commerce experience is also just a price of being in business in retail these days. Establishing deeper customer connections is really important. We see some of the companies that are listed here are doing that, the folks who are opening stores. And then speed, being nimble, is critical as an organization. So it's become very much more demanding in the retail sector, but the good news is you can still succeed. So what do you do about all this? Where do you go from here? Well, meeting customers where they are and leveraging digital are things that we help with, and as well as W Promote. So I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly at this point, Kimberly Raymond, to talk a little more about some of the things they're doing to help their clients succeed.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, no, so Brian's kind of showed us the challenges that are facing retail currently. Now I want to talk about some of the strategies that we're working with our clients to kind of, meet the challenge that a lot of these, mobile and Amazon have kind of brought forth. So without further ado, let's dive in. First one is Amazon. How do you compete with Amazon? It's probably one of the most common questions that I get asked and my teammates get asked on our side. And I think before you can even answer that question, you have to ask, why do people buy from Amazon? How is it that Amazon, as Brian pointed out earlier, now has 43% of U.S. e-commerce sales as of 2016? What makes them so appealing? And a survey that I have on the slide here from U.S. internet users, from March of 2017, shows that there's three main things that really stand out that consumers, look to Amazon for and why they buy from them. And those three things are price, convenience, and benefits. So then the question becomes, okay, how do we compete with that? Well, price, frankly, is pretty tricky. There's always going to be someone that's trying to undercut you on price, and that can go on forever. convenience, what that means to me and to a lot of our clients is it's no longer optional to offer fast and free shipping, for example. You have to offer that. You have to offer very detailed product pages that give consumers all the information they need. That's key now. The other thing that I really want to dive into is benefits. I'm sure many of you might be Amazon Prime members on this webinar right now. I know I am one of them. And if you've used the program, you probably have never even thought about canceling your Amazon Prime subscription because you use it a lot and it's convenient. And that's a big trend that we're seeing. And I think it's one of the key opportunities here for retailers is to develop loyalty programs. What is your Amazon Prime? What does your company have that is competitive and that gets consumers to buy from you? One of the most interesting things is another study that was done. U.S. internet users actually say that loyalty programs do have a big impact on their decisions on where they shop, and for some of the big box retailers, it affects them more than half the time. So developing a loyalty program should be, if you don't already have one, it should be the next thing on your list. It's something that can help you stand apart from competitors and also Amazon. Can you offer free samples? Can you offer any exclusive benefits that's going to make someone want to buy the product they're looking for on your site as opposed to Amazon? Something to think about here, and one of the key ways that you can fight Amazon in the modern age. Next, I want to dive into another topic that Brian brought up, which is consumer attention span. So as Brian kind of pointed out on that great slide, it's shocking to see, but now a fish has a slightly longer attention span than a human, which is crazy to think about. So the question becomes, how do you grab customers' attention? First thing I'll point out here is one of the biggest things that we've noticed on our end here at W Promote is that video is becoming a highly influential ad format, in particular on social channels, as opposed to anything else. We're seeing that video not only influences U.S. internet users, but also is influencing them to buy, make a purchase. It's not just something they pay attention to. It's actually playing a part in the purchase journey for them. So that's something to think about. As an example, look at the rise of Facebook Live and Instagram Stories. Those are now becoming, more and more popular. If you can do anything to get video content across to your consumers, it's something worth investing in. In particular, I will say on Facebook, it's something that their algorithm actually favors. So something to consider if you're advertising on Facebook. Another thing is if you've ever done a search on your mobile phone for a particular product. So I have one here as an example, Soul Society boots I was searching for. If you do a search like that, you might notice these images at the top of your search results page, which we call shopping ads. So they kind of have a link to the product, the price, and then the vendor that sells them, and they may or may not showcase, other offers along with it. The growth of shopping ads is really quite surprising. In the last year, according to Google, about 60% of all clicks on mobile are now shopping ads. And I think a big part of this is the rise of mobile that's been happening at the same time, as Brian did talk about. These shopping ads are taking up most of the mobile real estate when it comes to product searches, in particular on Google. So this is another thing that any retail client we work with, we really try to drive home the point. You should be leveraging shopping ads if you aren't already, because it's just taking up so much of that mobile real estate, desktop as well, but in particular mobile, it's really surprising the growth there. So something to think about in terms of ads formats that you can use. And then the last thing I want to touch on is really, as Brian kind of noted, a lot of the retail sales that are happening, they're still actually happening in store. It's not all completely online yet. And I don't think in-store is going away by any means. But the question is, how do you work with that in terms of your online strategy? How do you tie in-store to online and really make it a very omni-channel approach to everything? So one of the things that we've been doing with a lot of clients here is testing, betas to, current things that are out on the marketplace in terms of how do we tie clicks online on an ad to an in-store visit. Both Google and Facebook have, programs in place to do this. It just kind of depends on, the particular client and their needs there. But one thing I will say here is, we're seeing, if someone clicks on an ad, a search ad that we have, we're then able to tie it to when that customer visits a store location, and then attribute that store visit, to that ad click that happened, which is helping to drive in for traffic. It's not necessarily like online is competing with offline. It's more so that we're trying to influence offline behavior with some of our online advertising as well. And now I think we're all curious to learn how specific brands are kind of tackling a lot of these problems that we've talked about today. So now I want to turn it over to Andy Solomon, CEO of Soul Society, to show us how Soul Society is surviving and thriving.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. And excuse me, I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about Soul Society, our vision for our customer and our product, and then take you through some of the observations that we're seeing in the market and what it's like to be a brand in this dynamic retail environment. So just a little bit about Soul Society first and how we think about our customer. At Soul Society, we really believe that there's a smarter way to style. And when it comes to expressing oneself, we don't really believe that the normal barriers and ultimatums in retail that consumers deal with regarding price, quality, and style should pose a barrier. So we strive to give all the quality, the taste, and the style without these trade-offs. We like to say that if you have, all that you have to do is to worry about what works for you and your own style. We really believe that style is solely your style, and that's what we strive for. Our girl's looking for something new that works within her existing wardrobe. She already has her favorite pieces, many of which may be higher end, more expensive, but she's looking for accessible fashion, but with great quality and at a good value. And she's not looking to replace these key components, but she wants to inject a sense of fun, variety, and trend into her lineup. She's not obsessed with chasing the latest trends, but she does want to stay current, feeling fresh, and put together, which all make her feel more confident. So this is why at Soul Society, we believe in what we call fashion without sacrifice, style that's solely yours. We see, as Brian mentioned, a very dynamic environment, and we all need to confront that reality. As a professional in the retail world, we'd better take off our blinders and our kind of preconceived notions about how retail works or has worked, because we do have to face the brutal reality that it is around us, and we need to act. Retail is changing very rapidly, and unless we're willing to adapt, we will get left behind. As Brian said, it's not going away, it's just changing rapidly, and what worked 2 years ago or last year or 6 months ago doesn't necessarily work today. Just a couple of examples on the e-commerce side. If you think about tactics like invite a friend or the traditional batch and blast emails that many of us have used, those tactics are almost passé, and you need to have better programs in order to break through the noise and find ways to build audience. In addition to that, as a brand that's multi-channel, how we sell to department stores, how we sell to marketplaces, how we capture margin continues to evolve, and unless we're willing to do that, we're going to get left behind. We need to think about things differently. We need to challenge our own orthodoxies and look at our own business models and ask ourselves if they still work. Traditional brands are being squeezed on all fronts. Most importantly, margin. As retailers, we know generally retail is not a margin-rich business to begin with, but as everybody's trying to take a piece out of margin, and a lot of the kind of traditional 2.5 markup in retail is being squeezed, that creates challenges. In addition, if we distribute through a normal distribution channel of wholesale, the department stores are becoming more and more like real estate businesses, where brands often have to guarantee the inventory, or they're writing a big check at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, to guarantee their margins, there being the department stores. So times are changing, and it's really hard to be a smaller brand in the traditional retail environment. So that means that we, on e-commerce, where we can capture full margin if it's our product, need to take advantage of that. Next, we got to ask ourselves, are we, as e-commerce businesses, what is your business? Are we a brand? Are we a marketplace? Or are we both? If you're a marketplace, you better be darn sure that your experience is going to be compelling. You need to surprise and delight your customer. You may need to be promotional, more promotional. You have to have great service. We talked about earlier, free shipping and a great experience. You also, I believe, need to provide some level of curation, because if you're just a massive marketplace trying to have just a broad assortment, you're obviously competing against Amazon. And you need to have a point of view, and by that, you probably need to have some exclusive product. So playing in a marketplace environment can be challenging, but there are ways that I think you can compete. In a marketplace environment, you just can't be just selling commoditized product. It's almost impossible to succeed in that environment. In the world of brands, if you're digital first, are you digital first? Do you have wholesale? Are you both? Do you sell wholesale to other digital channels? Do you sell wholesale to regular brick and mortar? These are the questions that we all deal with, and depending upon what that looks like, your strategy will be different. Traditional wholesale brands are dealing with channel conflict now that they have e-commerce. They would normally spend dollars on media that clearly help their wholesale clients. But now, as media shifts to digital, that digital spend starts to get starts to conflict with your wholesale customers, because you're spending money pointing customers to your own business. So lots of different things to think about. You need to understand what your differentiators are, and we need to emphasize those. Next slide. Brian?
I just advanced it, Andy.
Oh, sorry. As a brand, we feel it's imperative to aggressively pursue and leverage e-commerce as a platform for growth. We all know the metrics that we've already gone over that have enormous growth in e-commerce, and no matter where your brand sits and what your distribution strategy is, as we've talked about, mobile. At Soul Society, we saw an enormous shift. 2 years ago, we were 65 to 70% desktop, maybe 20, I would say 60% desktop, 20% tablet, and 20% mobile. Now we're well over 50% mobile, and during the afternoon and evening, we're up to about 70% mobile. So things have shifted rapidly, and you need to be mobile first, as we've all talked about. A lot of folks are talking about apps, and if you have a compelling reason to make an app, either that you truly are omni-channel, where you control the experience in brick and mortar, then apps make a lot of sense. But if it's just for the shopping experience online, it may not be worth the investment in an app. So you really have to ask yourself, what is the consumer going to get out of the app? But obviously, responsive is where most people are going, and that's actually where we've gone, and we're about to launch on a new platform fully responsive site. And then want to just talk a little bit about content. Obviously, folks have been talking about how important content is for years and years and years, and that doesn't change. If we're not inspiring our customer with our product and our content, we're not going to be successful. However, it's very important to do that in the right places and keep it relevant. As we've talked about already today, customers' attention spans are very short, and so it really depends on how the customer is interacting with where you put that content, and make sure that that content can be viewed quickly and inspire so that we can get the customer back on the conversion path and checked out. So we definitely encourage and at Soul Society, creative, great imagery, great storytelling, but we have to be careful not to get bogged down in it as well, because especially on mobile, which is where all the traffic is, we need to be quick and get people through the funnel. We've talked a little bit about the multi-channel, and we really believe it is critical that we meet the customer where they want to shop, whether it's in a marketplace, whether it's in a brick and mortar store. Some brands may have their own outlets. In our case, we partner or we distribute through some traditional retail at Nordstrom, Dillard's, QVC, and some other places. And so we need to figure out what those touch points are, how our customer interacts, and find out how we can help the customer find and kind of validate the product that they want to, they want, or select and validate the product they want, and then make that purchase. We speak to our customers constantly. We use surveys, we interview customers. Our customer service, which we call SOS, sales or service, are actively selling to our customers online, and we capture lots of that information. We find out where they originally came from, whether they came from a Nordstrom interaction or a Facebook interaction, and then we try to make adjustments. And the other thing that we are constantly trying to do in understanding our customer journey is find out where we're successful and where we've kind of failed. So a couple examples of some changes that we've made over the past year and a half have to do with, one, the path of how they come to our site and where there's challenge. An example, we worked with guidance. We didn't have guest checkout. And for some smaller brands, that may be something that you do or do not have, but it was a big problem for us as we were requiring people to register. And that made a huge difference, and now about 65 to 70% of our transactions are actually going through guest checkout. In the end, we still get all the same information if they have to return a product, but that was a big change, and it helped our interaction with our customer. The other thing that we've done with a number of the vendors that we deal with has to do with the access to product. So we built a whole dropship functionality where we're able to access additional inventory from some of our vendors so that we have less instance of size broken product. And that's had a profound difference for our customers, because they were leaving because they couldn't find their size. And as a smaller business, we are obviously tied to how much inventory and capital we want to put to work to buy that inventory. So dropship has been a tremendous help for us. And then the last thing is we built waitlist. Waitlist was an easy thing for us to do as we're controlling our inventory. We obviously do have sometimes where we're size broken, and we started collecting waitlist information, and now there's an automated process where emails go out, and the conversion on that waitlist when these emails go out is between 10 and 15%. So really, really strong numbers there. Another example, cross-channel, where we've worked on kind of the journey for the customer is with our partner at Nordstrom. So they might, this past year, for the anniversary sale, they bought a number of different products, and they promoted it heavily, but also we promoted it heavily on Facebook through influencers, and that added boost had really helped our sell-through. We moved through that product. Nordstrom feels great about it, and that cross-channel promotion was super successful for us. So the next thing is that as a multi-channel brand, we all need to rethink how we're spending marketing dollars. Many of you may know that we're part of a larger company called Commuto Group, and we manage all the digital properties within Commuto. And Commuto is a traditional wholesale company that has traditionally, obviously, spent their money as you know, in the old channels, a lot of print, a lot of trade shows, some direct mail, but really fashion print. Well, that channel has dramatically changed, and you can see where the dollars are going. It's just the reach is not the same there. So as a company, we're having to change our media dollars and focus more on email and social media and display. But this change, as I mentioned earlier, is causing us to have to deal with some real channel conflict as our dollars are being spent to drive to our direct-to-consumer business rather than our wholesale business. And we're having to manage that very closely because still, as a broader company, Commuto Group depends on Nordstrom and Dillard's and Macy's. So we have to kind of walk this tightrope of where we spend dollars and how we spend them. But clearly, the dollars are shifting, and you really need to have expertise in email marketing, in social media, in what the latest kind of features and functionality and how you can spend on mobile are. So I would encourage everybody to be up to speed on influencers and how they can play a role as well. We've been very successful with that channel, and that's helped us navigate the cross-channel conflict. Interestingly, I saw a stat the other day that something like 65% of all of Nordstrom's web traffic is due to influencers now. So they're spending enormous amounts of money using that channel, and there's a reason it works. Finally, I want to talk about resources. With this very dynamic retail environment, one of the things that I've tried to focus on is our people. We need creative, curious experts in what we're doing. We need web merchandisers and digital marketing and digital creative and fulfillment experts, and we need real planning experts. So e-commerce is not an easy business, and so if you're a traditional brand trying to get into e-commerce, it's not as though you can just start a website and you're off and running. These are complicated businesses, and you need really good people. And if you have really good people, you need to continue to invest in them because the environment continues to change as we've articulated. And if you don't have intellectually curious and people who are constantly reading and trying to keep up with what the changes are, it's really, really hard to maintain a competitive advantage. And so that's something that we do at Soul Society constantly, is try to have an environment where we're sharing information, we're leveraging our third-party vendors, and in some cases where we don't have the expertise, we'll go to outside sources and outsource certain functionality, as we have with Guidance and W Promote, both of which have been great partners for us. So that's those are my thoughts for today.
All right. Thank you, Andy. And now, without further ado, we'd love to open it up to some questions. So if everyone could go ahead and chat questions in the chat box. We already had a few come in, so I'll go ahead and kind of go through a few first ones. Brian, this one is directed at you in particular. So many retailers and brands look at Amazon as both a threat and an opportunity. How should we be thinking about Amazon, and what things should a merchant consider when deciding to list products on Amazon? As a second part to this question, assuming we decide to list, what are the things we need to do to get visibility and sales on the channel?
Well, that's yeah, I can I can take a pass at that, sure. And then Andy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on it too, but so thanks for the question. I think, number one, it does, Amazon is a question we get all the time from a strategic standpoint. Should we go on Amazon? I think you have to think about, number one, is Amazon is now the top place people are doing product searches. So if you are a brand and you own the product, there's really the key is your relevancy to people looking for product is at stake to some degree. So we generally argue that if you're a brand or a manufacturer where you own the product and you have, that's your differentiator, like as in the case of the Soul Society where, Andy, you guys own and produce the product. There's really, you really ought to be on Amazon, and because it's a place people are looking, and Amazon's giving more and more tools to register brand and other things to make sure that you're presented well. And as a marketplace seller, you control the pricing, etc. So there's advantages to and ways to control your destiny there. If you're a retailer or a reseller, it's a little trickier if you don't own the product. There's some strategies you can take there to kind of protect and kind of own the channel on behalf of your suppliers, for example. You could make deals with your suppliers to help you get, kind of exclusivity on the channel. That would be between you and your suppliers. And it kind of varies by category. I think that we often also get posed the question of, boy, is Amazon going to go into my business? Amazon is now the number 2, and this year is expected to be the number 1 apparel retailer in the United States. And part of that is they have, I think, 12 or 14 of their own apparel brands. So there are, and if you look at commodities like batteries and others, that there are businesses that they will go into directly. So I think on a industry by industry basis, you have to really think about your category and whether Amazon, is something that Amazon would pursue. I think as you go up the product complexity and uniqueness angle, with things like footwear, but as you get into electronics and other things, it's less likely that Amazon will be in your category. So I think it really depends, but those are some of the things we encourage people to think about. And the second part of the question was, what do you do once you're there? Well, Amazon has developed into its own, its own sort of place where there's optimization similar to what you've seen for years on Google. Amazon is introducing not only sort of paid marketing tools and such, but ways to participate and highlight your brand and bring more attention to your brand within the marketplace. They have millions and millions of products, so it's important to take advantage of some of those things. So that's one piece, and the other is making sure your product data and the foundation is solid, and that's important for organic listings, making sure you're showing up well represented, multiple product pictures, video, really well defined and well described product titles and bullets and benefits and things. So Amazon is now, if you're there, deserving the same attention you give to your own website in terms of the product content and merchandising and marketing, et cetera, and brand registration. So it's a big topic, but those are just some initial thoughts. Andy, did you have anything you wanted to say about Amazon?
Sure. I agree with everything Brian has said. For us, it's a little more complicated question. And that is because until very recently, we were owned by Nordstrom. And so that created a real conflict as Nordstrom obviously considers Amazon a primary competitor. In addition to that, I do think that it depends where you are in your growth stage as a brand, and it depends on what is your distribution strategy. And by that I mean, if it is purely, you have limited distribution and your goal is to maximize your distribution and your sales online, the answer is simple. Yes, you should go on Amazon. If, however, your distribution strategy is more complex and you distribute through multiple channels, there are reasons why going on Amazon could possibly create conflict. And so you have to think through what happens if I go on, if I'm already selling to Dillard's and Nordstrom and whomever else, and how are they going to respond? And if they decide that they're not going to carry your brand, how does that affect your business? Because Amazon is considered, the big bad wolf, and you need to figure out how you play with them and deal with your other distribution points. That being said, in the end, I think we're all going to be selling on Amazon at some point. And so I think these are short-term decisions versus long-term decisions, and what your current plan is and how you're going to get the distribution and the volume that you need to achieve.
Great, lots of good answers there. All right, we have a few other questions. Andy, this next one is for you. Andy, in a very dynamic retail environment where a lot of retailers and brands are struggling, is this an opportunity for Soul Society to innovate and invest in more market-driving initiatives to create real separation from your competitors? Or are you more cautious now than ever before?
Well, we're optimistic about the opportunity to continue to innovate and find ways to offer a compelling product. I think that if you don't have a huge legacy infrastructure, I think it's an incredible time. If you're a big retailer that has a whole lot of stores and real estate and leases, I think it's a tough time. One of the things that I'm very excited about is that we are part of a bigger company, Camuto Group, that I mentioned, and so we are fully vertically integrated. So from an e-commerce standpoint, we have the ability to capture the full direct-to-consumer margin in our e-commerce businesses. And because we have now scale behind us, we're not just Soul Society, but we have a lot more manufacturing capacity. That added margin affords us the ability to continue to invest in experience and content and in product that we think is going to be compelling. I think it is challenging as early stage brands to come on if you don't have margin. Retail really is about margin, 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 margin. And one of the things that I've learned over the past number of years is I kind of look at businesses and I do a quick 2x2 with margin and complexity. And if you have a business that has high margin and low complexity, well, that's a home run. If you have high margin and high complexity, you have a possibility of success. If you have low margin and high complexity, run for the hills. And if you have low margin and high complexity, which a lot of retail businesses do, that's a really, really hard battle. So you just got to look at what is going on and figure out what are the kind of components that your retail business and how the model that you've built works with these different components, and then that would determine what your ability to invest in the future looks like.
Great. And Andy, another question's coming from the audience for you. And this is a question anyone feel free to answer as well. From a technology investment standpoint, What do you feel is a reasonable investment as a percent of revenue to accomplish what you have detailed?
Oh boy, that's
It's a tough one.
I think I don't have, the answer is I don't have an answer for you. I think it depends where you are, right? If you are a large company and you're way behind on your e-commerce platform, I think you need to invest a lot of money. I think if you're a growing business, you're a retail business, or you're an earlier stage brand, I think, well, let me take a step back here. It depends what your balance sheet looks like. If you're a venture-backed company, in today's retail environment, you better show that you can be profitable. The old, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you could raise a lot of venture capital and show huge top-line growth, and that was fine. Now, it has been shown pretty clearly that it's really hard for these businesses to make money. So, pouring dollars into acquisition and into technology. So, for a brand or retailer, you got to show that your model has the ability to make money, that there is margin. And so I would be less aggressive in spending big dollars behind feature functionality and technology until your model shows that your transactional model works and that there's a profitable model to be made.
Good answer. I would just add to that question as another perspective on that too. To your point, Andy, that you made about what type of retailer you are. One of the brands that I work with, thousands of stores across the U.S., very well-known brand, never really sold online until a few months ago. And for them, when they're going against tremendous, other billion-dollar companies out there, it's a huge investment, and it's a situation where they're going to invest a lot in the first 3 years and have to see that money over time come to fruition. So I think to your point, Andy, it does really depend on, are you a startup with a lot of venture capital, or are you a bigger brand that's maybe a little late to the game?
Or are you selling mustard out of your garage, right?
Yes.
And, it depends where you are. But for those companies that are bigger companies, like you just mentioned, that have, that brick and mortar infrastructure, I talked about how that can be a liability. But if you're well capitalized, a bigger retail business, you need to spend a lot of money, because what that business should be doing is building a e-commerce system that allows you to fulfill from all those stores and allow the customer to buy wherever they want, and for the most productive inventory to be maximized. And if the least productive inventory, that's where we should be fulfilling e-commerce orders, so that overall inventory is more productive. And to build that kind of e-commerce system costs millions and millions of dollars, but it's that back-end inventory control that will make the difference, where you can provide a truly multi-channel environment for your customers.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for the very detailed answers, Brian and Andy. We're just about at time. If there's any other questions, I know our contact information is on the final slide, so feel free to reach out. Just want to end today by thanking everyone for joining. And a common question that's come up is the recording. We will be sending out a recording, not to worry, so you'll be able to kind of review or share this with some of your other colleagues as well. And that's pretty much it. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.